Dinosaur Rex. I've never killed a dinosaur in my life. In fact, I rather like the brutes. As a child, I used to fantasize about befriending one, taking a thorn from its paw, or saving it from agonizing death in the tar pits. Yes, this should do. I'll take one. Make it two. And look at me now, Hempstead Wallop, gazing down a large boar at the huntsman's shop. The whole situation was my Aunt Celia's fault. She'd summoned me and I'd responded, though the visit was not likely to be a pleasant one. I didn't dare refuse. I appreciated the allowance I received from Aunt Celia, and, in fact, its failure to materialize 2 months in a row had placed my finances in some jeopardy. I prepared a short lecture on the subject, opening with a pithy comment about the difficulty of mending convertible tops when a chap's allowance checks are suddenly disappearing like corpses in a murder mystery. It seemed to take Hovis the butler an interminable period to answer my ring, and when he did, it wasn't the well-preened Hovis at all, but the rather imposing figure of Aunt Celia. "Come in, Hempstead. You look ghastly. When you're through dripping, please join me in your uncle's study. We have a crisis to resolve." We rendezvoused as planned in the study of my Uncle Grenville. I was surprised that Aunt Celia chose this spot for our discussion. Generally, the mere mention of my uncle's study made her eyes roll and her eyelids flutter, as if an unhealthy stench had just wafted through the room. "Oh, what's the latest from the good uncle? The last I heard, he was chasing the spotted styracosaur around the banks of the Cubango. Abandoned the quest when I reminded him of his pledge to pursue no adventure lacking the words treasure, tomb, or riches beyond imagining." Which brings us rather neatly to the heart of the matter. I'm broke, Hempstead. Absolutely cobbles. "Oh, funny, I'm a bit financially embarrassed myself. Meant to speak to you about that. My last 2 allowance checks. As usual, the essence of the situation eludes you. I am not a little short this week, Hempstead. I'm bankrupt, without assets, insolvent, penniless." "Good God! You mean to say you haven't any money?" "Precisely. The concept I was groping to convey. Creditors bark at every door. Unless something is done soon, I shall have to sell the estate." "Then my allowance is at risk?" "Your allowance is dead, nephew. It has breathed its last." I felt like a spotted styracosaur pierced through the heart by my Uncle Grenville. A silence deep as midnight on the banks of the Cubango settled over the room. And what about Cousin Flavia? Have your wild extravagances left her destitute as well? Unfortunately, yes. And since her divorce from Lord Sip, I'm afraid she's in much the same boat as you. It's time to look for work, Hempstead. I hear they're short of clerks at Harrod's. Oh, I can't bear it, Aunt Celia. A life spent in the electric sweeper department is no life at all. Not even the allure of promotion to crocks and fancy tins could make the days endurable. Then there's only one alternative, Hempstead. We must find your Uncle Grenville. Somewhere among your uncle's papers is a clue to his present whereabouts. We must prevail on him to send us whatever booty the African continent has yielded, and put some coin back in the family coffers. Well, we set to work, excavating the site of that modern Nineveh, my Uncle Grenville's desk, untouched since his departure half a decade ago. Several hours digging had turned up nothing to indicate the whereabouts of the missing relative. I might have given up, but for the thought of my dear cousin, Flavia. I'd always entertained a fondness for Flavia, and her ill-considered marriage to Lord Sip had nearly done me in. A lesser man would have crumbled. Instead, I rebounded into the arms of a certain Icelandic viper. I fled from that reptilian woman upon learning of Flavia's timely divorce. In a way, I welcomed this opportunity to elevate my status with her, and with Aunt Celia, who currently located me on the hierarchy of organic material, somewhat higher than excrescence, though not so lofty as snail. It seemed I had nowhere to go but up. As anyone who's ever launched himself into the wilds of Africa in search of his Uncle Grenville can tell you, such expeditions do not come cheap. Thus, the next week found me haunting familiar grounds, the famous Saurischia Downs. It was the work of a moment to locate my cousin. I'd heard a rumor that buoyed my hopes for the sixth race, a rumor Flavia was in a unique position to confirm. Oh, absolutely true, my boy. Flavia's own is a shoo-in in the sixth. The trial gallops were 3.0 and 3.2 under the track record, respectively. Unfortunately, the news leaked. Betting has been heavy on Flavia's own, and the odds are miserable, 6-5. Damn, I was hoping for the long odds. I'll never get anywhere on 6-5. Oh, Aunt Celia told you then about the family fortune. Yes, and if I don't find Uncle Grenville in Africa and persuade him to send home the wealth he squeezed from the natives, I can kiss my monthly allowance goodbye. And mine as well. Suddenly, a strange sensation coursed through my body. A chill ran through the Wallop frame. My spine stiffened, and the expression on my face prompted Flavia to remark, "Oh, what ho, Hempy? Someone drop a live eel down your back." Duubadah! 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 Really, Hempstead, I was having quite a lovely time before you started popping up and down yelling, Duubadah. He's here, Flavia. Uncle Grenville's African manservant, Duubadah. He's trying to attract my attention with his psionic powers. Quick, the binocs. I think I've spotted him. That's him, all right, up in the Lord's Club. But who's that blighter with him? Come on. If anyone can lead us to Uncle Grenville, it's Duubadah. But we can't barge into the Lord's Club. They'll have us on our ears. I received a strong mental image of the betting booths. Duubadah will no doubt meet us there. After a quick round of introductions, we got down to business. To wit, how had Duubadah been pried from the service of my Uncle Grenville? In a word, cribbage, young sir. The place, Bangui. The wager, my contract. The outcome favored my current employer. Hard to feature that. Uncle Grenville was island champ at cribbage before embarking to the Dark Continent. Less I have perceived in my employer a certain duplicity of manner. I fear the contest with your uncle was not bound entirely by skill and fortune. Eh? What do you mean? He's saying that the louse slipped Uncle Grenville a marked deck, skunked the wager, and walked off with Duubadah's contract as ill-gotten gains. What? You mean he cheated? You have seized my meaning most admirably, young sir. I say, imagine the gall. Lead me to him, Duubadah. I'll show him what it means to trifle with wallops and their uncles. Alternatively, if Duubadah may be allowed the indulgence of a suggestion, one thing I've learned, when Duubadah refers to himself in that self-effacing third-person manner of his, it's time for wise men to cock an ear, which I promptly did. Suppose the young sir were to propose to my current employer a wager, let us say on the 6th race, at stakes my contract versus a sizable sum of money. My employer favors Flavia's own quite strongly. If Flavia's own were not to win the 6th, the young sir and I would be free to embark on the required expedition. Duubadah, you failed me. In the first place, we haven't any sizable sum of money to wager against your contract. And secondly, Flavia's own is a sure bet in the 6th. Hempstead's right, Duubadah. We've little money, and Flavia's own is 6-5. I'm afraid your plan's a bust. If Duubadah might be allowed further observation? Regarding stakes, the sum is required only if the wager is lost. I have planned for that contingency. As for the race itself, experience teaches us the true rarity of the sure bet. Perhaps if the young lady were to share her intimate knowledge of the steed, well, one shies from the word sabotage. And still, I believe I see your point. Yes, indeed. It's an outside chance, But listen to this. We'll have to work quickly. Duubadah introduced me to his current employer, one Thorbjorn Hornjorn. He was an Icelander and an explorer to boot, which is the best thing to do with explorers, I've found. I maneuvered the conversation around to the sixth race and dropped a disparaging remark about Flavia's own. When I proposed a wager of 2,000 quid, the Icelander was skeptical. But the odds, Flavia's own is the sure bet. Experience teaches us, Hjorn, old boy, the true rarity of the sure bet. No, the animal strikes me as weak in the withers. The offer stands. Meet or retreat. The choice is yours. Oh, you're on then. If Siga agrees, as my fiancée, she is to be consulted on these matters. Siga? Ja, Siga, Jean's daughter. You wouldn't know her? What? No, not at all. Hot in here. If the term blood-curdling describes a chap's blood turning to cottage cheese and his jellied heart dropping to the pit of his stomach, then my blood did indeed curdle at the sound of the name Siga, John's daughter. For this was the very same Icelandic viper I'd fled when I'd got the chance, like a rodent from the jaws of an asp. Well, Hempstead Wallop, imagine seeing you again. You know this man, Siga? We've met. In Reykjavik, wasn't it, Mr. Wallop? Yes, Reykjavik. But you just now told me you didn't know my fiancée, Mr. Wallop. Oh, did I? I really can't recall. Perhaps you mistook my meaning. Be that as it may, we're all here together at last, eh? I propose a toast to the sixth. To the sixth? The sixth race, you mean? Whatever for, Mr. Wallop? Mr. Wallop offers 2,000 quid at even odds against Flavia's own. I'm tempted to accept. Unfortunately, our money's already in the betting booth, earning a scant 6 to 5. If you'd been here earlier... Where's the pity? Well, it was probably a foolish wager anyway. Excuse me, sir. I couldn't help but overhear. If Duubadah may be allowed to suggest an alternative? Duubadah had intervened right on cue, and the wager was decided. Duubadah's contract against my imaginary 2,000 quid. Oh, look, they're at the starting post. Listen, Duubadah, about that contingency plan. Yes, if we should lose, I recommend rapid retreat, loudly exclaiming fire to incite the crowd and hinder pursuit. They're off. Well, it isn't much of a plan, is it? There he is, number 11, first through the gate. He's taking the lead already. He's taking the lead, Duubadah. Shh. Will you look at that stride? What a beast. Have you ever seen something like it, Mr. Wallop? No, never. Now, the whole plan revolved around a quirk of Flavia's own, known only to my cousin. The steed, hatched in a storm, retained a deathly fear of thunder. Our only hope was for a whacking great boomer to throw Flavia's own off stride, a hope which faded in my breast as the clouds parted and warm sunshine bathed the track in a golden glow. Good dry track today. We'll see a new record for sure. Looks like there's no catching him now, eh, Wallop? No, it seems not. I shot a sizzling look at Duubadah, a look I trusted would burn him to the quick for his lame-brained scheme, only to find my fiery stare a pathetic, tepid thing next to the incandescent fury that was his own. Lucky for me, I was not the object of that stare. No, it was fastened on the clouds, and my heart flew to them in pity. In seconds, the sky darkened once again. The clouds crashed together, writhing in agony. Lightning flashed within their bowels, and Flavia's own trembled. He was once again a hatchling, cast into a cold, wet, booming world of darkness. He broke his stride, stumbled, and recovered. A rumble like an earl's stomach at mealtime sounded from above. The crowd glanced heavenward, and still Flavia's own neared the finish line a full 3 lengths ahead of Ticklish Rib. My heart had just decided to quit beating when suddenly it can't be. No, I won't stand for it. Look at the stupid animal. Oh, rum and go, old boy. No record today, I'm afraid. I say, Flavia's own seems inclined to begin the race all over again. He's headed back to the gate. Oh. Grudgingly, the Icelander made good his bet. I accepted Duubadah's contract in a sportsmanlike manner and retreated quickly. Not caring for the look of viperous hatred in Siga Johnsdotter's eyes. Flavia, meanwhile, had brought home a staggering sum on the winner, Ticklish Rib, at 100-8. Our expedition was underway. To be continued. Dinosaur Rex, Part 2 of a 3-part series. We, that is, myself, Hempstead Wallop, my cousin Flavia, our friend and manservant, the amazing Duubadah, were bound for the Dark Continent in search of my Uncle Grenville. Not to mention a fortune in jewels or
artifacts, or some such, to replenish the family coffers, which, except for our recent winnings at Sauricia Downs, were as barren as the caverns of my stomach after several hours dedicated to spewing all manner of vile substances over the rails of this bloody, heaving blimp. I say, Hempy, we need you desperately in the ballroom. It's ladies' choice, and not a soul under the age of 104 to pick from. It's the end for me, Flavia. Marry me quickly, and I promise to fling myself overboard. Whose idea was it to take this bloody blimp anyway? Yours. Boats make you seasick, you said, and do stop calling it a blimp. It's a dirigible, distinguished by its rigid frame as opposed to the soft or semi-rigid support structure of the... Oh, Hempstead, must you?
Ah, Master Hempstead, I've found you at last. I've been all over this ship.
So has he, Duubadah, though in a rather more literal manner.
Muster your courage, young sir. I took the liberty to prepare a mild restorative.
Restorative? Poison? What's the difference? Hand it over, Duubadah. Duubadah's potion slithered down my throat like a serpent. A warm serpent. Well traveled, by the taste of it, of the dank, mushroomy kingdoms of shadow and rot. But I polished the stuff off and waited patiently for some response. It was not long in coming.
You clumsy oaf! Oh, my apologies, sir. That noise! I thought we'd exploded. Come, look, darling. The eruption seems to have come from our quarry.
I say, Hempy, that was rather a corker. How do you feel?
Well, I feel a new man.
Duubadah, your potion is incredible. Bring on the headhunters. Let the poisoned arrows fly. I'll catch 'em in my teeth. Toss me to the carnosaurs. I'll bash their brains in. Lead me to the raging tigers. Point me to the nearest man-eating plant. Throw me into the churning piranha-infested waters. Tie me to the...
I believe the young sir has adequately communicated his recovery. This being the case, perhaps the time has come to reveal certain facts of our expedition. Facts that I have heretofore withheld in deference to your condition.
Are you hinting at some deep, dark secret concerning the good uncle, Duubadah? If he's involved in anything unsavory...
Nothing like that, I assure you. Still, confronting the issue will require a certain fortitude that...
Oh, for God's sake, Duubadah, out with it. And do try to employ the terms treasure, tomb, or riches beyond imagining. Ancelia was quite specific on that point.
Treasure, then. Though I hasten to add that it is more of the carnivorous than the numismatic variety.
A trifle. We'll exchange it at the Bank of London. I fear the young sir does not take my meaning. Recall that we are discussing your Uncle Grenville. Of course we're talking about Uncle Grenville. Who did you think I thought we were talking about? What he means, Hempy, is that this treasure of Uncle's, rather than lying about casually in the form of precious jewels or coin of the realm, is more likely chasing around the jungle ripping the flesh off small animals. Oh, good God! You mean it's some kind of beast? Some would say, sir, the beast of all beasts. Duubadah proceeded to relate a tale that would have quickened the pulse of an undertaker. So fraught was it with mortal peril. It began outside Bangui, where, commonly enough, Uncle Grenville was throwing a load of shot in the direction of some blighted prey. Blast! Didn't do more than nip him, the duff-hided beggar. More powder in the loads from now on, Duubadah. That one barely lifted me off my feet. Can't be niggardly with the powder if you want to bring down the big ones. Yes, sir. My uncle's blood boiled in his veins as he and Duubadah pursued the wounded beast. This was the sport he was born for. Day wore into evening, and the quest was on the verge of postponement when... Oh, it's no good, Duubadah. Too hazardous, traipsing around the jungle at night. We'll have to make camp. Here's as good a... Shh! We're close, sir. Very, very close. The question is, what are we close to? Quietly now. God bless my soul. I thought it was only a legend. The Tyrannosaur Rex. Tell me I'm imagining things, Duubadah. The apparition is all too real, sir, and I fear we've attracted its attention. By gun, Duubadah, prepare to enter history. If you deem it necessary, sir. Steady on, old boy. Whoa. Run. Didn't even faze him. What a beast. It was as if Uncle Grenville were under a spell, transfixed not only by fear, but by admiration, even reverence for the slathering deathbringer that was upon him. Only at the very last moment did awareness of his plight seem to creep into his consciousness. And by then, of course, it was too late. It was only a glancing blow, delivered by an aging specimen wounded and weak of leg, but it was enough. The beast moved on, leaving my bruised and broken uncle to Duubadah's tender ministration. Mo. Don't try to speak, sir. Save your strength. More powder next time. Duubadah rounded up the stray bearers and carried the battered relative back to Bangui. There he, that is, Uncle Grenville, lapsed into coma, but Duubadah remained ever by his side, confident in the triumph of the true huntsman's spirit over the fragile physical form. After 2 months, Uncle Grenville snapped suddenly to life, commanding, "Duubadah, mount an expedition." He was released shortly thereafter. The expedition required funding, of course, which precipitated the ill-fated cribbage game with the explorer Hornyorn, the outcome of which you well know. The loss of your contract. So where did you leave the poor man? Along the shores of the Ubangi, as I departed with my new employer. The expression on his face strongly resembled that of a bulldog at a funeral. Perhaps it escaped my notice, Duubadah, but tell me, where, in this harrowing tale, lay the promise of riches? Only implied, sir, in the age of the specimen encountered by myself and your uncle. It was elderly and wounded, seemed, as it lumbered off, resigned to the final fate. Legend has it that somewhere on the dark continent is situated the last resting place of all tyrannicorns. Secluded by mountains, perhaps, probably considered taboo by natives of the area. Modern theory postulates an ancient race that worshipped the tyrannicorns, that protected them, perhaps even offering themselves as living sacrifices to feed the brute's fearsome appetites. With the approach of death, the beast feels a powerful resurgence of ancestral memory, a longing to return to this fondly remembered spot, now populated only by bones and history. The Tyrannicorn Graveyard. Needless to say, the discovery of such a site would be the paleontological prize of the century, not to mention the bonus of a fortune in ivory horns. The Tyrannicorn Graveyard. A fortune in ivory. Is it possible, Hempy? Well, it jolly well better be, if we're to avoid a fate worse than death. Clerking at Harrods? Exactly. I'll not torture my public with a detailed account of our journey by boat to Bangui, last recorded habitat of the elusive Grenvilius potshoticus. Only one noteworthy aspect presented itself: a boat similar to our own, following at close range, but never hieing alongside, not even when we stopped for the night. At Bangui, we took refuge in an oddly cobbled-together structure dubbed the Embassy Sick Hotel to wallow one last night in the splendors of civilization. Well, that night, I happened to spy Flavia, flitting between shower and bedroom. And I must confess, the sight animated my bosom. I was struck again by the imperative to impress her with my forthcoming valor. The next several hours were spent replaying Flavia's little dash in my mind, until at last I fell into agitated and fitful slumber. Yes, it was spelled exactly that way, as if cribbed from an amended travel guide. I will forever remember it as the Sick Hotel. We set out the next day, retracing the path of my uncle's previous expedition. You can't be tired already, cousin. We've barely begun. I hardly slept all night. I had the most peculiar dream. I was trapped in this tiny corridor, and I kept running back and forth. Seems as though it went on for hours. And several days out, Duubadah discovered a path that could only have been made by the wayward relative. Yes, the crush of your uncle's boot is distinctive. There can be no doubt. Will we catch up with him, then, if we press on? That I can't say. Once he's on a scent, your uncle is capable of an uncommon alacrity. Eh? What he means, Hempy, is that when the bloodlust is on him, our Uncle Grenville can move like a tiger in rut. Oh, I see. Needless to say, Flavia's offhanded reference to hot-blooded beasts wrapped in the throes of passion established the tenor of my thoughts for the rest of the day. By nightfall, I could tolerate the pain no longer. Inflamed by her raw, earthy scent, I confessed my admiration to Flavia in a torrent of poetic froth. So, what I want to say is, that, well, I'm sure you couldn't possibly, but, well, I know what you mean, Hempy, and the sentiment is not entirely unmutual, but it would be rather ridiculous, wouldn't it? I mean, the two of us scrapping by on clerks' wages? Wrapped in a miasma of bitterness and despair, turning inexorably to crime to feed our drug addictions. It's all a bit too penny dreadful for my taste. No, I really wasn't listening. I was still working on sentiment, not entirely unmutual, and trying to figure if it came around in my favor when... Well, the mad beast erupted from the forest like a dragon with a hot foot, spewing flames and trampling our fragile possessions into junk. This way! My tent! Catch it, Duubadah! Consider it done, miss. My tent. Well, aren't we all glad that's over? Now, how do you suppose the stupid brute got its head caught in a pair of flaming bushes that way? I fear it was no accident, sir. Rather, I strongly suspect the hand of the saboteur lies behind this regrettable incident. Eh? Triceratops don't just go poking their heads into flaming trees, dear heart. Somebody tied those bushes there and lit them. We have an enemy in our midst. An interloper? What gall! The bloody cheek of the devil. Now who do you suppose? It appears that our rampaging visitor may have left a clue regarding that very matter. A lapel pin, probably dropped by the saboteur and picked up in the dinosaur's foot. What incredible luck! Do you recognize it, Duubadah? Indeed. The Global Order of Explorers, Iceland Chapter, My previous employer was never without his. Horn. From this point on, we must be forever on guard. I volunteer myself for the first watch. But what about my tent? I suppose I shall have to double up with someone. If I might be allowed to offer a suggestion. A suggestion or an invitation, Hempy? Well, a bit of both, actually. You were awfully brave back there, Hempstead. I noticed the way you sheltered me with your own body, throwing yourself between me and the brute. You could have been crushed, reduced to bloody pulp by a single press of the monster's foot. We've had to send you back home in buckets. Just think of it. Hempstead? Dinosaur Rex concludes next issue.
Dinosaur Rex, Part 3 of a 3-part series. We had traveled through the jungly rot long enough. My razor had gone dull, and I had apparently been listed as a 4-star restaurant in someone's guidebook for hungry mosquitoes. I was sick of it. We, myself, Hempstead Wallop, and my cousin, Flavia, and our manservant, Duubadah, were on the trail of my Uncle Grenville, who was, in turn, on the trail of the Tyrannosaur Rex and the fabulous Tyrannosaur graveyard. Also sought by the nefarious Icelandic explorer, Thorbjorn Hornjorn, and his viperous wench, Sigga. We pulled to a weary halt on the perimeter of what was once a mighty metropolis, now doing a bang-up impression of the weedy patch out back of Aunt Celia's potting shed. Well, we've arrived. So we have. And not a moment too soon for my tastes. Even the rubble of civilization looks jolly and hearth-like to me at this point. What do you make of it, Duubadah? Is this that hotbed of Tyrannosaur worshippers who, even from the grave, exert their influence over the beasts? The emanations are quite strong, and, what's more, we have been preceded to this spot by others. Perhaps by the very personage we seek. Does he mean we're closing in on the good uncle? Why, Hempy, you understood him all on your own. There may be hope for you yet. Duubadah closed his eyes and made a small noise as if humming to himself, a sure sign that he had called his amazing psionic powers into play. Shortly, bad news, I'm afraid. My previous employer, Hornjorn, is here too. We'll have to be on the alert for treachery of the highest order. Duubadah, guided by his uncanny brain, led us into the ruins. And I don't mind telling you, the whole thing struck me as rummy. Very rummy indeed. The place gave me the creeps. Any associations I'd entertained between these ominous piles of rock and the words jolly and hearth-like were quickly abandoned. In fact, with the possible exception of my uncle's study, I was hard put to recall any place less jolly or more unhearth-like than the dismal edifices now surrounding us on every side. I say, Duubadah, you don't suppose there's any of them left, do you? Any of those brutal native folk? It is doubtful, sir. What we are more likely to encounter is the tyrannicorn itself, drawn to this site by the tug of racial memory. Probably in pain, if it's near death, out of sorts, feeling a bit snappish. In fact, oh my word, we were never to learn what word Duubadah had in mind, for at that very moment, what? Oh! The monster had caught us unawares, surprising even Duubadah and his keen senses. For the tyrannicorn, closing the distance between us was the work of a moment. Aye! Ah! Ooh! Ah! Ow! Aside from the crippling effect the monster's charge had on the level of conversation, there was one other casualty. Oh, bother. My arm. I fear it's broken, sir. Oh, Duubadah, the pain must be extraordinary. I have blocked it mentally. However, the breakage is most inconveniently timed. This was one of my favorite arms. I'd become rather, attached to it. It will take months to grow a new one. A new one? Of course. Yes, of course. We knew of the remarkable regenerative powers of many Saurisians, naturally, but had never had the opportunity to see the phenomenon in action. We spent the next several minutes following our unidextrous friend in stunned quietude. We could hear the tyrannicorns bellowing ahead of us. The fact that the beast hadn't chucked us down its gullet earlier indicated that it might have other things on its mind. Such as dying, which is what tyrannicorns reputedly came to the graveyard to do. We hoped to follow it straight to the wandering relative. Our pursuit led us to a well-preserved arena, the site, as Duubadah put it, of all manner of sanguinary activities conducted for the bloodthirsty rabble. No doubt the tyrannicorn played a significant role in these scaly proceedings. Well, I say, do you think it's wise to beard the creature in its den this way? Suppose it isn't in the mood for company. The poor thing's on its last legs, Hempy. Listen to that pathetic groaning. Chances are we'll have to build a cart and carry it to the graveyard ourselves. We entered the tunnel, hearts in our throats, and felt our way gingerly along the walls. Soon enough, we found ourselves in caverns as black as the devil's toenails. I heard a low chortle. Someone brushed against my sleeve, moving in the opposite direction. I say, Flavia, was that you? It wasn't me. I thought it was you. It was not, I fear, any of us.
We've been led astray. Quickly, back to the entrance.
We hot-footed it back towards daylight. From ahead of us, there issued a grinding noise like Demosthenes crunching a mouthful of rocks. The gate! Someone's lowering it on us. Someone, indeed. Listen, the Tyrannicorn. But how did it get out there?
How marvelous to see you again, Mr. Wallop.
Sega and Hornyorn. What a fiendish trick, leading us on with a ruddy horn.
A priceless artifact utilized, no doubt, to lure the Tyrannicorn into the arena.
Instead, it lured us into the soup. We've been had, Hempy.
What do we do now, Duubadah? Now, you rot, you ungrateful little rodent, leaving me boiling alone in the hot springs, will you? Stick me with the towel deposit. You trifled with the affections of an Icelander, Mr. Wallop, and now you'll pay the price for your folly. Will you quit that bloody honking?
Funny how, even when one is facing certain doom at the hands of a woman one has scorned, one finds oneself grateful for small kindnesses. I might have thanked Singa for the favor if I hadn't wanted just then to wrap my hands tightly around her throat.
The path to the Tyrannicorn graveyard has been worn quite clear. If we see your uncle, we'll give him your regards. Farewell, Hempy.
So, Hempstead, this is the kind of cad you are. No doubt our trail to Africa is fairly littered with your romantic corpus delicti. Hot springs and bath towels, is it? I should have guessed. No wonder your fingers were always puckered. I see now I should have listened when Oncelia grouped you with the lower invertebrates. You bounder? Now, the introduction of Oncelia into any conversation remotely pertaining to romance was a low blow. Quickly, I composed a stinging report. Oh, ho! Flavia's was not one to leave the gauntlet lying at her feet. Immediately, she leapt into the fray. How is it? It is. Pooh. Pooh? With knobs on. Well. Shh, listen. Well. Ho. Really, Duubadah, I've had quite enough of Hornyorn and his wretched trumpet without... I believe, sir, that we are currently hearing from the genuine article. Furthermore, the source of the communication would seem to be not far down this very corridor. What he means, Hempy, what he means is that we're stuck in this ruddy tunnel with an iron gate at one end and a snarling carnivore at the other. That's what he means. That would be an honest accounting of the situation. Yes. So, we're sunk either way. Well, no use mewling in our hankies about it, eh? Our destiny, whatever its flavor, lies at the end of this corridor. I say we meet it like sports. Tally-ho! Of course, the beast did come here to die.
And it's probably not the specimen we met on the road at all. Probably some wobbly, toothless old thing with lumbago. Don't you imagine, Duubadah? If it comforts you, sir. We lucked out and found some old torches stuck to the walls. The corridor twisted and branched off a number of times, but we persevered, taking our heading from the regular ruonks that met our ears from the tunnel's depths. The most disturbing aspect of the business was the occasional trembling of the walls and floor. Duubadah said of the matter, the native spirits are not happy with our various intrusions on their sacred grounds. I fear some spiritual hanky-panky may be in the offing. Hinting at the big scene where the volcano blows up and takes everyone with it, Duubadah? Something like that, yes. Duubadah's words were prophetic. We hadn't gone 10 paces when... Flavia, look out! Oh! The dust had not begun to settle before Flavia posed the very question currently niggling the self. Namely, I say, Hempstead, where's Duubadah? Flavia fell to her knees and began clawing at the debris. I was about to do the same when a raspy, busy sort of noise entered my head and buzzed around inside like a hornet on a string. Hempy, don't just stand there like a waxwork. Duubadah's buried. We have to dig him out. Not necessarily. I'm receiving a broadcast on the Duubadah channel. He says not to worry, he's tip-top. We should press on. He'll meet us further down the tunnel, where it loops around. Thank heavens. But how can we be sure the tunnel does loop around? What if he's just trying to keep our spirits up? Oh, nonsense. Not only is Duubadah infallible in matters of navigation, but he hasn't an untruthful bone in his body. Not with friends, good and true, at any rate. If he assures us of his health, then he's fit as a fiddle. If he promises to meet us, then meet us he shall. Oh, Hempstead, forgive me for arguing with you earlier. We are in this together, aren't we? To the bitter end. And we must be grateful for one another, even though you are a modern Lothario. Oh, of course. You admit it then. Certainly not. You just did. Hardly. Ho! We journeyed on for the better part of a lifetime without making any apparent progress. Melancholy swooped down and seized me like Oncelia did Uncle Grenville that time he lit up a cigar at the dinner table. We're doomed, Flavia, but I must confess, I wouldn't trade a moment of this whole blighted trip. Whichever of the many kinds of cad you've characterized me as, I still adore you, and I treasure my time in your company. Hempstead, come and look. Good Lord, how amazing. Rather a pip, isn't it? The Tyrannicorn Graveyard. And so it was, an ancient reservoir of bones and, most notably, a fortune in ivory. Enough to ransom 6 kings and a dozen prime ministers and never feel the pinch. Hempy, a moment ago, did you say you adored me? I did and I do, with all my heart. But no time for that now. We have to find the good uncle and keep him from the clutches of the Icelandic vipers. There's no telling what their ilk will do to sew up a claim as sizable as this. Not so fast, Mr. Wallop. Gah! I'd hoped the catacombs would be sufficient to restrain you until you perished of hunger or thirst. Unfortunately, you are either more resourceful or far luckier than I imagined. A more direct solution is obviously called for. It should be easy enough to hide a few more bones among all these. Well, looks like she's got us, old thing. Well, there is one consolation. You mean not dying of ennui behind the sales counter at Harrods? Well, there is that, but what I was thinking of was, at least Duubadah's well out of it, wherever he is. What? Huh? It's Duubadah with one of those bally horns. An obvious attempt to distract me, an attempt that has failed miserably. Tell him to shut up and surrender himself, or, oh, yes, I take your meaning. What? More horns from the opposite direction. How many of those ready things are there? It's more than just horns, Hempy. I do believe it's... Yes. Uncle Grenville. Uncle Grenville. Yes, it was the relative in the flesh, and very little else. I might add, the good uncle had evidently gone native on us and somehow gotten himself crowned king of the Tyrannosaurs in the process.
What-ho, chappies? Long time no see, eh, what?
He charged through, motioning us to follow, while our adversaries were kept busy avoiding claw and fang. Quickly, you two, hop aboard. We haven't a moment to lose. The spirits are angry. Plunder and thievery don't sit well with them, I'm afraid. They won't tolerate intruders for long. Would help if the dashed ground would stay put.
The graveyard's been defiled. Now the spirits have got to bury it, and us with it if we aren't lively.
Duubadah said this was going to happen. But our fortune... No time to fill our pockets, Hempy. Looks like it's Harrods and drug addictions for us after all. Blast! I was hoping to avoid that. I don't know if I can do it, Flavia. Face on Celia, I mean, empty-handed and all. Perhaps the situation is not as hopeless as the young sir perceives. If Duubadah may be allowed... Of course you may. Suggest away. My excursions into the byways of these tunnels resulted in a fortuitous discovery, which, unless I'm very mistaken, may yet allow our enterprise to result in financial remuneration. Stumped you with that one, didn't he? What he means, Hempy, is that while wandering around after the cave-in, Duubadah apparently stumbled onto the treasure room. Not the treasure room per se, miss, but a passable substitute. Just ahead, sir. If you could steer us into the left fork.
Left it is. Grand to have you back, Duubadah.
Thank you, sir. make a long story short, Duubadah was as good as his word. His keen senses led us straight to the hatching room. Of course. Even modern times have seen a bit of activity here, I'll wager.
Look, Hempstead, some of these eggs are actually fresh enough to eat. If one were so inclined, I mean.
I rather had the heart set on gold and jewels, riches beyond imagining and all that. Buck up, lad. Those eggs are as good as gold. Back home, they'll be worth millions if we decide to sell. If, why on earth wouldn't we sell them? Tell me, nephew, did you happen to notice the gallop of these beasts? The stride is amazing. We loaded up the buggy and made it back to the jungle without further incident. We did not see or hear from the Icelanders again. The trip back was slowed by the fragile nature of our cargo, giving Uncle Grenville ample time to recount the details of his religious conversion. The tale was a long one, involving a dream he'd had under the fever in Bangui, a revelation in the ancient city of the Tyrannicorn worshippers, and some business I didn't fully understand about rebirth amongst the bones of antiquity or something. However, a few days in the tendrils restored the uncle's true spirit, and he quickly reverted to his former self. Out of range. Dash it. More powder next time, Duubadah. Very good, sir. I myself was moved to the sway of passion, and somewhere along the line proposed marriage to Flavia. The silly girl accepted. So, what do you think of this idea of the uncles? This Tyrannicorn breeding? Any substance to it?
Well, the stock is sound enough, but I wonder if the good uncle has the stomach for it. Tied to the manor with Aunt Celia, weekends spent hosting the gentry, all that.
For Uncle Grenville, it would be rather like setting up shop in the lower levels of Hades. I shouldn't be surprised to find his courage failing him by the time we reach Bangui. In point of fact...
Oh, shut up, Hempy, and kiss me.
And so, I was thinking, Duubadah, reunited as we are, why not let the youngsters have the eggs and the ranch while you and I pursue our manly adventure elsewhere? And what form might this adventure assume, sir? Oh, just any big game. Anything less formidable than Celia, don't you know? The electric allosaur, for example, or the giant rabid bat. Very good, sir. The end.